We are live for another night of 49ers conversation, and there is a lot to talk about. Last night or yesterday at some point, the rumors started swirling again about Brandon Ayuk, so I got to get my man Sunil's thoughts on that. We got to talk about strategy for the offseason. Do the 49ers have a roster building issue? What are they going to do at the D coordinator spot? And I've got a mystery topic that not even Sunil is prepared for. We're going to talk about all those things plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Tuesday evening, which means I got my guy, So Real, Sunil in the building. What's up, Sunil?
Just in one of those many rooms in my mansion. Got to get another Tuesday show in with my boy. And it's wild how we're just so, like, 2 weeks removed from the Super Bowl, and there's already, boom, like, off season. Already jump into it, man. This 49ers never a dull moment when it comes to content creation.
Absolutely not. I mean, it's so easy to make content for the 49ers. I don't know how this happens year after year. What's up, chat? Much love to y'all for tapping in. We don't need to talk about that. Okay.
He's
talk
right, though. Wow, that's great.
He already knows from the background and everything.
Man, he could tell by the decor, I guess.
I love it. Well, let's talk about Brandon Ayuk. There's obviously a lot of rumors about Brandon Ayuk, and I feel like we've talked about this every way that we possibly can, but the rumors are not stopping. And so the question is just simple. What should the 49ers do about Brandon Ayuk? It is the most tradable asset that they have. If they get rid of him, there's no cap hit. He's young. He's coming off of an all-pro year, second team all-pro year. Probably get a nice little haul for him. But should they get rid of him is the question. So let's make it a two-parter. Should they get rid of him, and will they get rid of him? We'll start with should they get rid of him, Sunil?
Yeah, and I understand both sides of this. Obviously, we've seen someone who maybe by definition, Jesse, has had much more successful of a career than Brandon Ayuk and Tyreek Hill be traded for with Kansas City, traded him to Miami, and then Kansas City goes off and reels off 2 straight Super Bowls after trading, an all-pro game changer, MVP quality wide receiver in Tyreek Hill. The difference that I see in that situation and this situation is Brock Purdy isn't Patrick Mahomes. And even though I like Brock Purdy and I do think that, he's the quarterback of the future here, he definitely isn't the elevator that Mahomes is, where Mahomes could get away with that. And probably to a certain extent, me being a Kyle Shanahan fan, I still think Andy Reid is a better coach than Kyle Shanahan, right? So that combination, I think, can do more than possibly what the 49ers might be able to do. I am super high on Brandon Ayuk. I've already stated on this show and many other shows, I think that he has the potential to be a top 3 receiver in 49er history, which obviously we know some of the great receivers that have come down, this franchise. To me, I think they're in a unique situation where, so to answer your question directly, I don't think they should. And the reason for that is because eventually they're going to have to make a decision between Debo and Brandon Ayuk. I don't think that the decision has to be made this year. I do think it needs to be made in 2025. And I think that decision is going to be extremely easy to make, right? So to me, I understand you can't keep both of those players. So I would trade Debo in 2025. However, when we're talking about just this season and him being the most tradable asset, what are you going to do with that asset, with those assets, right? If it's go in and try to find another Brandon Ayuk, well, you already have a Brandon Ayuk. If it's to use those assets to go fill multiple positions, maybe. But I don't think more draft picks necessarily is what the 49ers need right now. They have 11, right? So unless they're getting two high round picks, Jesse, like a first and a second or 2 seconds, something like that, to me, more draft picks doesn't really solve the issue. And I think financially, you solve for that by getting rid of Debo when his contract becomes more tradable or cuttable.
Yeah, I agree with you. The 49ers are not in cap hell, not yet, anyways. And I think the way that these contracts are going to work out in the age of some of these players, I don't think that they'll be in cap hell for a while. I mean, I know they're going to have to pay Purdy, and if they pay Ayuk, things can get squirrely. But a lot of these guys, we've talked about it all season, really. We've talked about how going into 2025, things are going to be very different with this team. And Brandon Ayuk is a guy that, in my opinion, you have to keep because you're right. You know, Brock Purdy's not the elevator that Patrick Mahomes is, or maybe some of these other guys. And so with that, wouldn't you want to build with Brandon Ayuk and Brock Purdy and allow guys like Kittle to fall off eventually, Debo, who's older, to fall off eventually, and try to replace them as you go versus getting rid of your youngest, healthiest, arguably best young asset that you have on this team? That doesn't make any sense. So keep Brandon Ayuk. Do not trade him. It just there's no reason to do it. You're not against it cap wise, in my opinion. And I don't think they're going to trade him either, Sunil. I really don't. I mean, I know that there's a lot of conversations about it, but I think the 49ers are smart enough to look at it in a similar way that we are, knowing that Brandon Ayuk has a lot of years in front of him. He's a pure wide receiver. He can grow with Brock Purdy. And as these years pass, he will move up the depth chart as far as what weapon he is. You know, he may be weapon number 3 now, but he's soon going to be weapon 2 and even 1. You got to keep Brandon Ayuk around. So no, don't trade Brandon Ayuk, and I don't think they're going to trade Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, I agree with you because, if Kyle Shanahan is anything that I believe he is, and I think a lot of people do believe, obviously offensively, there's people right now that may not think that he knows what he's doing. But to me, you look at Brandon Ayuk, and when you could get the type of production out of him with how little he's being used compared to the people that have similar numbers to him, like it's untapped. He's gotten better every single year. He brings more than just his receiving ability because he's one of the best blocking receivers in the game, if not the best. He's a great locker room guy. And ultimately, if you give him more opportunities, those numbers are going to just go up. And those are the type of, I think, assets that you just don't want to give up unless something ridiculous comes down the line. And when I mean ridiculous, I mean like high round picks, multiple high round picks, because once again, you got to look at it situationally. The 49ers aren't a team that are lacking draft picks, right? This is a year where we have our first round draft pick, we have our second round draft pick, and then we have 9 other draft picks as well. You know what I mean? So if it's just gonna allot like another third round and a fifth round or a second and a late round pick, like does that really bring back what we need to elevate this team? I would say no. I think you're actually losing more with Ayuk than what you're gaining with whatever second round draft pick and late round draft pick you might get for that.
Well, and rookie wide receivers a lot of times don't produce for any teams, let alone a Kyle Shanahan team. I mean, his preference is not to play a lot of rookies, especially at the wide receiver position. And you've heard guys like Jerry Rice and some of these other greats say that it's very hard to come in and just be great right away at the wide receiver position, especially in a complex offense like this one. So I don't think that that's the move. This team is still trying to win a Super Bowl this next year. And even if it gets contentious and BA has to play out his 5th-year deal and you franchise tag him and figure out a trade after that, then do that. But you're trying to win this next year. You're trying to be the best possible team you can be this next year. That includes keeping BA. That does not mean moving on from BA. So to me, it's a pretty easy choice.
And yeah, and absolutely. I think even if you look at just a production wise, you would expect Debo, Kittle, maybe even CMC to maybe take a little bit of descending, as far as their stats, especially Kittle and Debo. We know Debo's still struggling to stay healthy throughout the whole season. You
Mhm.
expect Kittle to possibly be, have already reached his peak and is probably going to get less and less production. The only asset that you have that's still ascending, where you still haven't reached his full potential, is Brandon Ayuk. So if you are looking to win, which I do think, and we'll get into that when we're talking about strategy next. But if you're going all in again this year, as it's your best shot, like that's the one player that it's like you want him back, right? You're not going to be able to just replace him in the draft, especially with the All Pro season that he just put up. And his All Pro season, I think, is a little bit different than the Debo season because it wasn't just doubled up of the previous year, right? It was a gradual, like you saw the growth year after year after year, where you believe that he can continue to do this, if not even get better with more opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Gammon says, Sunil, why so spicy on X lately? And then he later said that he loved it. We
You
were
know
just
what it
talking
is,
about that
Gammon? To be
backstage.
honest, brother, I think that the fan base has gotten so emotional after this, and I get it. I understand it. But I don't think we could create these narratives, and I'm going to do my job to just set the record straight. And to quote, some right wing conservative pundits, facts don't care about your feelings. So it might be coming off as spicy, but it's really just emotionless facts.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about some of that spiciness on Twitter when we get to the roster building question. But Gammon says it's officially off season. What was your first video game? Man, first video game?
I could
I
start
mean,
with that while you're thinking about it.
yeah, go
Obviously,
ahead.
so my first system that I ever owned, the first video game I ever played was on Atari. It was
Yeah, that's what I was
Sports
saying.
Talk Football,
Okay.
or maybe it was on Sega. I don't know. But my first one I ever had was a Nintendo. Obviously, it came with the Mario pack or whatever. But the first game I bought for a Nintendo that wasn't included with the system was Ninja Turtles.
Ooh, good game. That's a good game. The first game that I ever bought probably was Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
That's a good one too. That might have been my
Mike
third
Tyson's
game that
Punch
I
Out.
bought.
Yeah. So for those of you that know, 007-373-5963, that's the code to Mike Tyson. There you go.
I never knew that, man. I had to beat it
Now
the
you
hard way.
know.
I had to
Now
beat
you
it the hard
know.
way.
Brother Bob says, I'm late, but I finally agree with the clean head. All right. There we go. Brother Bob says, trade Debo and Kittle after 2024. Keep BA all day. Do you think after the 49ers got rid of Buckner, if they were to move on from BA, what do you think the response would be from this fan base? Because it's interesting. We do this every year, Sunil, where we see whenever a player is a potential to be traded or not paid or is up to be paid, all of a sudden, like everybody who loved him throughout the season is like trashing him. Like he's not a
Yeah.
good player and they downplay everything. It's the weirdest thing. But if they were to move on from BA, let's say during the draft, how do you think that would be received by this fan base?
I mean, I think it would be a mix. I think there's a section of the fan base that trusts Kyle and Shanahan blindly, and I know a lot of people would just say Sunil's in that. I'm not necessarily all the way in that, but I think I trust them more than the other fan base. As like, no matter what they do, it's going to be the wrong move because they can't win and Jed needs to fire him and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's all like any decision. There's no unanimous conformity or unanimous like uh, everybody just agrees on the same thing. But I also think once again that's like a narrative that to me isn't factual. Like the Buckner trading was a choice that they made between two players. They could only pay one, and they played similar. They couldn't bring both of them back, so they ended up going with the one that they felt like was cheaper and more diverse as far as they could play in multiple positions. And then obviously Buckner, who is the better player, like I don't think there was any argument about that. But because he's the better player, you could get the higher draft pick for him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the case. Like if they trade BA, it's not like the replacement is on the roster. They're gonna have to search, for that player. And I don't, with what BA has turned out to be, I don't know if that guy is necessarily out there that they see right now.
Yeah, that one's going to be super tough. Hopefully, we just don't do it. That's where I would start. 49ers Throwback says, who do you take, Sunil? Free agency. Would you rather have Danielle Hunter or Azeez Al-Shaair back?
Ooh, that's a good one because before the injury to Greenlaw, the answer would have been Danielle Hunter. But because of the injury to Greenlaw, it's Azeez all day.
Oh my gosh, you too? Me and Coach are back and forth about this one yesterday.
To me, it's just that we saw how vulnerable the defense is without a linebacker that could do the things that I think Azeez can do that, Oren Burks can't do. I don't know if D Winters is that guy or if they draft a guy that could come in. But, once again, we're thinking Super Bowl or bust, Jesse. We saw how, they were able to take advantage of there not being that other option that I think Azeez would be able to plug in. You would take Danielle?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In a heartbeat. I mean, I like Azeez, but my thought is Greenlaw will be back at some point next year, right? And I don't expect him to be full Greenlaw, but I will take Greenlaw, whatever he's at. And also, I really like Jalen Graham a lot. I know he's a rookie. I know he was a 7th-round pick. I know that there's a lot of thoughts there, but between him and Winters, I feel like one of them can step up this offseason and kind of fill that role. So that's just me. I think getting premier pass rushers are really, first of all, just more important than linebackers anyways. But they're just really hard to find. And the 49ers really haven't had another one opposite of Bosa since D Ford was here in 2019. And we saw how great that tandem was. And that was a rookie Bosa. So imagine Bosa 4 or 5 years later with Danielle Hunter. Oh, man, that'd be
Azeez
scary.
is also more realistic financially, though, too.
I think both are actually pretty realistic. I do. Now, Azeez is more realistic. I agree. But I really think they could afford Danielle Hunter if that's the route they wanted to take. I think for Danielle Hunter, it depends on how many years he wants. If he wants 3 years, absolutely not. If you can get a 1 or 2 year deal, I think you can make it happen. But we'll see.
And I mean, seeing Azeez show up for the 49ers playoff run, there's just something nice to know that, like, I think he wants to be here too. So I think that would just be a great marriage, and it fills a need. You know what I mean? So I would do that. But I get your point. Like, Danielle Hunter is obviously a great player. I don't think you could get him for 1 or 2 years, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's like 30, 31. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm curious to see. A lot, the thing is that a lot of people say, oh, he's going to get, 20, 25 million a year or whatever. I don't know what people are projecting. I don't think he's going to get as much as people think, but we'll see. We'll see. I could be wrong. And maybe he's way out of the price range. I feel like he can be had. That's just me.
And
personally.
here's the other thing. Once again, the beauty and the curse of the 49ers being such a greatly run organization is we constantly get pieces taken away from us. Adam Peters probably thinks along the same lines as the 49ers with way more money than what we're going to be able to offer. So I think that if there's a player that's on our radar, it's probably on Peters' radar too.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Fortunately, he's stocked with a lot more money than we have at this point.
That's true. I wonder how often they're going to step on each other's toes during the draft as well. That'll be interesting to see. It's something we won't necessarily know, but it would be interesting to figure out what that looks like. Well, let's talk a little bit about this off-season strategy, though. There's definitely a multitude of different ways that we can go. I've gotten tons of messages on Facebook Messenger and in my DMs on Twitter with people giving their opinions on this. And I think it's a fun topic because there are certainly multiple. You can retool, you can do a full rebuild, you can do a run back. Like there's so many things that you can do. And I think a lot of it does come down to your philosophical roster building, which we will get into next as well. But what do you think the offseason strategy should be for the 49ers?
Well, I think they're also limited to, what they're able to do, right? So I don't expect the roster to change that much at its core, but I do think that there's going to be some decisions made. Like, I do think there's going to be at least one splash because they do that every single year. And I think that the decision is, what is that splash going to be, right? So last year, I think the splash, even though it didn't pan out to be the splash you wanted it to be, was Chase Young, right? But something that's interesting to me that, this team has always been built around the defensive line making everybody else on the defense better, right? Our front seven has been always dominant, and I think we just naturally just go towards, hey, let's just pick up another great edge to partner with Bosa and make that happen. Well, what I saw from the Kansas City Chiefs was that if you have two elite corners, it gives you a lot of opportunity as well. And that's something that I think the 49ers could look at, especially, I know we haven't gotten to D coordinators yet, but, for me, Daniel Bullock is my front runner. He was my front runner last season when they didn't end up going with him, but secondary coach, if we could get somebody alongside, Mooney Ward, like maybe even better than Mooney Ward, right? Let's just say, obviously this isn't realistic, but like a guy in the Patrick Surtain type realm, or like just a shutdown corner. I think that changes maybe some of the weaknesses that we have on defense to where now it's giving our defensive line more time to be able to get to the quarterback versus our defensive line making the jobs easier for the corners. And that's, I think, what we saw a little bit in the Kansas City game where, those cornerbacks dictated a little bit as to, what Kyle Shanahan was and wasn't doing in his offensive game plan. So when it comes down to strategy, I think obviously most of the players are going to be coming back. You re-sign all of our big names. I would love to re-sign, obviously Brandon Ayuk, we said, I would love to re-sign Jennings because ultimately if Debo walks, I think Jennings would be a good, second or third option always for the 49ers. But my splash this year, Jesse, I would want it to be a really elite corner if possible.
Oh, I would love that. I would absolutely love that. For me, strategy wise, what I look at with the 49ers is we talked about Ayuk and what bringing back Ayuk does and how you've got to move on from some of these other players here in the next couple of years. But the only way you can do that is if you remain flexible. So my strategy is whoever you're bringing in, 1 and 2 year deals, 1 and 2 year deals. And then to bring those guys in, I do not want to see them pushing back a bunch of contracts and freeing up money. I don't want to see you go ahead and restructure Armstead and Kittle and Debo and CMC and all these guys to free up this money so that you can go make these big splashes to try to
You
win.
have to pay the bill.
You're going to have to pay the bill eventually. And they've already done that. They should have had the outs on Kittle and Armstead this year. Obviously, they knew they weren't going to want to use that. But going forward, you are eventually going to want to use those outs, those potential outs there. And you can't do that if you continue to kick the can down the road. You can choose a guy maybe to do that with and free up some money if you want to go get somebody. But you can't do it with all of them the way they did last year. Trent Williams is another one. I just don't think that is financially smart and a way to continue to keep the success here because this core is getting older and some of these guys you just have to move on from eventually and you have to remain flexible. And the only way you can do that is keep the contracts intact. I know that a lot of them are really high dollar amounts. They're scary dollar amounts this year, but that allows you to remain flexible after this next year. They do have some cap space. They can kick the can down the road on maybe one of those deals, but do not do it with all of them. That's not a strategy to remain competitive long term, especially if you want to re-sign BA and you're going to have to do the same thing with Brock next year. So just be financially responsible is what I'm going to ask from the 49ers. That's the strategy I want to see.
Now, I guess we could get into draft after this, but you know that they're always going to make one splash free agent signing or trade or
Mhm.
whatever. I know you talked about Danielle Hunter. Would you rather it be an edge or would you rather it be a shutdown corner?
I'm honestly fine either way. I really am. I think that you can be successful either way. The nice thing about the corner position is you have a lot at your disposal because Diameter or Lenore can play inside or out. And
Mm-hmm.
that gives them flexibility. So if there's a really good nickel corner you want to go get them. Diameter or Lenore can kick out. There's a really good corner that plays on the outside that you want to go get them. Diameter or Lenore can play on the inside. There's a lot of flexibility there. So best player available that you can get on a 1 or 2 year deal, maybe if it's like a Jalen Johnson, obviously, that's a young player. You can probably sign him to 3 years and feel good about it. But if it's a Danielle Hunter, I don't want to see anything over 2 years. So it just depends on the age of some of these players that you're going after as well. And if you're going
Let's
after a
say
corner, it's probably going to be somebody younger.
let's say it's Jair from Green Bay.
I love Jair Alexander, but man, that guy can't stay healthy. I'd have to go with Daniil. I think Jair Alexander, when he's healthy, is still top 5 corner in this league. I really think he's that good, but man, he just can't stay
Because
healthy. I can't
there's
trust it.
realistic talks that Green Bay is gonna like part with him, right?
I don't know. I don't know if they're going to let him go. I mean, I could see it happening for sure. I mean, they're trying to create some flexibility as well and kind of build around this young team. And Jair's not old by any means, but he's expensive and he's closer to 30 than he is 23. So
Mm-hmm.
I could see them potentially going that route. I'm not sure, but somebody of that caliber, if the player is healthy, probably go a player of that caliber. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have that in the secondary. I don't think we've had that in some time, so it would be
Yeah.
cool to have, especially with, like you said, Demo being as effective as he is at multiple positions. If you could have like a Mooney Ward, Demo in the inside, and then Alexander on the opposite end, I think
Yeah.
that gives our defense, a lot of wiggle room. Can make up for some maybe lack of, you know, penetration that the D line is getting.
Pause. So the people are saying that we can't make a splash move. I disagree. I think we can. And I'm not saying like 25 million a year, but 15 to 20, I think they can afford it. I really do, because you're gonna have around 37 million once this money rolls over. You extend BA, that's gonna save you some money up front. You choose one of those big contracts I talked about to kick the can down the road on. Maybe that's a Debo or whoever you decide that you want that to be. And then that's going to free up, another 15 or so million. They can get a guy. They can definitely get a guy. So it just depends on what they want to do. So
Yeah, and I mean, there's players that like Isaiah Oliver. He's probably not coming back. There's a couple million there.
yeah,
You could do something with Juice, and cut him
yeah,
and re-sign him for something cheaper. I'm sure he would come back at a sweetheart deal if he still wants to play. So I don't think he's going anywhere. So I mean, there's ways, and I do think that each year we don't think that the 49ers are capable, but somehow they figure out to bring one guy in. So I don't think that trend stops.
yeah. I don't necessarily think it does either, but we'll see. Gammon says favorite win of the season. Thoughts on rookies? Favorite win of the season had to be that Philly win, man. If we're going regular season, it's got to be that Philly one. That was the one that was like at the time. Remember, that was the two juggernauts going head to head, and I know that the result was a blowout, but that's not what people were thinking going into that game. So that one would have to be it for me. And then
Mine
thoughts
was
on the
the
rookies. Yeah.
NFC Championship game, the comeback against Detroit. To
Oh,
me, that
listen, if
was.
we can go playoffs, then I'm there.
Oh,
I would say
does
the
it say
Green.
regular season?
Well, no, I just said of the season. So fair enough.
Yeah.
I was there for that one, so obviously that one would be great. The Green Bay one I could go with too, because that's what allowed the NFC Championship to happen, and I was definitely worried there at the end. But I'm gonna go regular season win. I go Eagles. NFC Championship for sure. If we're just going season totality,
my regular season is the Cowboys for sure. That was the most fun to watch.
Yeah, that was a great dismantling. And then he says thoughts on the rookies. A lot of excitement around some of these rookies because the 49ers do this every year. They redshirt some of these guys. So, what does Luter bring to the table? What do those linebackers we were talking about, Winters and Graham, what do they bring to the table? Obviously, we didn't see much of either of the tight ends. Moody, Jair Brown, I think is looking pretty damn good. So I think there's some optimism around some of these rookies.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see Kalia Davis with the full offseason and what he could do. Not Kalia Davis. Who's the guy? Beal.
Robert Beal.
So, yeah, I mean, look, one thing, I know we're going to get into it, like, 49ers know how to draft for however much people say that they don't know how to, but they're always going to find at least, 3 or 4 gems in their draft class and at least one All-Pro.
I also think that people have written off Ronnie Bell as if he can't get better. We talked about how hard it is to perform at the receiver position. Not everybody comes in guns a-blazing. I mean, a lot of good receivers were not good as rookies, and they talk about how hard it is to transition in that position. I think Bell can be pretty good still. I really do. I haven't written him off at all. I think a lot of people have.
He got a lot more opportunity as a rookie than most receivers do that pick that low on the 49ers. So,
yeah, for sure. Ramon says if the front office does some restructures, they can afford both. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, man. It sounds like you probably put that in before we'd had the conversation, but yeah, absolutely. Chris says pay BA, pay JJ, trade Debo post June 1 for a right tackle, draft Brendan Rice, then draft. Also, Jed, anything less than a Super Bowl championship is a failure. We're the effing 49ers. Yeah, I didn't like his comment about if they had lost in the NFC Championship, it was a successful season. No. Cameron says, Bob, Sunil, and Jay we need to play a dice game. Great. Jordan says, we have an offensive line building problem. Can we address either the line, coaching, or something? Like name a good O-lineman that was a Shanny era guy. I mean, I think Banks of the drafted guys, obviously, they did trade for Trent Williams too. I don't think that we can just bypass that. Frank Tom Ocean says, I just want to stack the whole line, needs to be number one priority. Well, these are great comments, and I think it allows us to transition to what the show's really built around, which is the roster building. And this is what kind of got you a little fired up on Twitter. A lot of people thought you were probably coming from a place that I don't think you were necessarily coming from, but the conversation is out there. And the conversation, I think, started with my guy, Ryan. I think he was on Grant's show talking about roster building and some of the flaws that he sees with the roster building. And then he clipped up the video and you took it and ran with it and had your own opinions on it. So I'm gonna open up the floor for you. Roster building. Do the 49ers have a roster building problem? I think your answer is going to be no, they don't. But why don't you walk me through that?
Yeah, and I don't want to I don't want us to like misconstrue what Ryan's opinion was, because I don't think if we got Ryan on here, he would say that the 49ers have a roster building issue. Like anybody that knows football knows that the 49ers roster is one of the top 5 rosters in the league, if not top 3 rosters. So you can't have as many all pros that this team has and say that this team doesn't know how to build a roster. I think Ryan's points were specifically about the offensive line. And so, that's where I
think what he's saying, prioritizing, like the 49ers to him, the 3 spots, and I agree, you usually prioritize the quarterback, protecting the quarterback, getting after the quarterback. And the 49ers on spot number 2 really haven't put a lot of priority into that. And I think there's frustration from him on that. And again, this is not a show where I'm going to talk about other content creators. And if I do bring up a take about them, I'm always going to name them so that they understand that this is not, we're not coming at anybody. We're just bringing it up for conversation's sake. And Sunil disagrees, but it's not coming from a place of malice by any means.
And look, I think that when it comes to this narrative that I think there's a difference between have the 49ers tried, have they gotten it right, and then what's their philosophy surrounding the position, right? So I think that there's the sentiment that the 49ers haven't tried. And to me, that is a narrative that doesn't make sense. They've had 7 drafts under the Shanahan Lynch regime. They've drafted offensive line in 5 of those drafts. 2 of those picks have been a first rounder in McGlinchey, a second rounder in Aaron Banks. And then in one of those drafts, they also traded for the top left tackle in the league. 3 out of the 5 starters on this team are homegrown, drafted and developed players. So the 49ers are doing what they can to build this offensive line. Now, am I saying this is the best offensive line in the league? No. I think a portion of that has to do with the way that Kyle Shanahan looks at the offensive line. I don't think he necessarily looks at offensive linemen the same way that maybe the fan base would like to look at offensive linemen, maybe some of the players in the league, because he values more their ability to run block than to pass protect, because he feels like he could scheme things to overlook weaknesses and maybe pass protection. And I think that's where people really get at. That's where the crux of maybe the frustration with some of the fan base is, and it's warranted. Like, look, that's a philosophy thing. I don't think that's going to change under Kyle Shanahan, because ultimately he believes in his ability and his quarterback's decision making to be able to get the ball out to the right person quick enough, and that his offensive linemen can hold up long enough to be able to do that. Now, obviously, when you look back at this Super Bowl, there's been moments where you wish you maybe had a guy who could just, win one-on-one. And then there's discussion. Was that a scheme issue? Did the guys just miss their block? So there's a lot that goes into it that I will admit I don't know all the X's and O's. And ultimately, I would probably challenge most people that debate about the offensive line and how good they are, whether or not they know all of the nuances that are going on about the offensive line. Because I do think that sometimes we think players are worse than what they are, because just like a cornerback, you only remember the negatives. You don't remember the 95% of the times that they held their blocks. You remember the 2-3% that they missed their block or whatever, because that leads to a negative play. But ultimately, when it comes to the offensive line, like I said, I completely agree. Like, one, the 49ers haven't had a first-round pick in a couple of years because they went all in on Trey Lance, right? That severely hinders your ability to get great offensive linemen. You're pretty much kind of reaching past the first and second round for offensive linemen, hoping that maybe somebody falls to your position, or you have to be able to, really evaluate the position at a level that maybe the 49ers aren't as great as, so I'm not saying that it's a strength of theirs, but I am saying that I think that people that just say the 49ers don't value that position, they don't try at that position, to me, they don't. I think it's more about they value the position in a different way than maybe traditionally valued. And I have seen a lot of effort in them trying to upgrade the offensive line. I just don't think necessarily it may have worked out the way that they have. But to me, I'm on the side. I want them to use a first or second round draft pick on one of these tackles to really upgrade that right tackle position, and obviously, potentially maybe 2 tackles, so that they have, somebody on deck for when, Trent Williams ultimately retires. But that's basically what my argument was, is that, like, it's not, I don't think we could just say, oh, the 49ers are able to draft all of these positions well, and then all of a sudden they just don't know what they're doing at offensive line. I think it's more of a philosophy thing that people just maybe don't agree with. And I get it if you don't agree with it, because it's obviously a lot different than just those, drop back, give your quarterback 4 or 5 seconds in the pocket type of offensive lines. That's not, I don't think, will ever be built under Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, I'm glad that you answered because my next question was, okay, does your stance change if they don't draft an offensive lineman with that first pick? But it sounds like that's the route you want to go as well. I think you're kind of right. It's a choice. It's a philosophy choice. I don't necessarily agree with it. I mean, they put a lot of stock in skill position players, which is interesting for a guy who is an offensive coordinator. You would think that that wouldn't be the preference. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just not what I would prefer. I'd rather win in the trenches, and they do that defensively, but offensively, that's not necessarily the route that they've taken to put the most priority into the offensive line. Not that they've put none in. I don't think that they've put none in, but what they have put in really hasn't hit the way that they probably had hoped or thought or what have you. So we'll see. I mean, I think that they definitely need to draft an offensive lineman with that first pick that they have in this draft, pick 31, or if they move back a couple spots, move up a couple spots. That's definitely what I would like to see for sure. So I don't know,
Unless
man.
somebody crazy drops. Unless somebody crazy drops,
Yeah.
obviously. But yeah, ultimately, and I think, there's this sentiment that the 49ers, like, they don't prioritize it. And I just think the way they evaluate the position is different than the fan base would like them to evaluate the position. Like, Mike McGlinchey, for a lot of people, he was a terrible right tackle. Well, the league didn't see it that way. The league ended up paying him as the number one right tackle, and the 49ers let him walk because they didn't want to pay him that much. And ultimately, he didn't pan out for the Broncos. But they felt like McGlinchey wasn't. I'm not. They felt like McKivitz was feasible. Like, there wasn't going to be that much drop off, and he was cheaper. Now, obviously, McGlinchey had an up and down season. His downs were, well publicized, and the fan base loves, picking on the right tackle, and rightfully so. He had some terrible games and some terrible moments, but once again, I think they value more his ability for run blocking than pass protection, and that's just something where if you're a 49er fan, you're gonna constantly, I think, be frustrated in that, because ultimately I think that when this regime evaluates the offensive line, they're looking for mobility and their ability to block the run, even if it means that they're not as good at pass protection. And ultimately, that's just something that you have to just you just have to understand that's what it's always going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Niner Gang, yes, he does. So Real Sports Talk. He talks a little bit of everything over there, though, so it's not going to just be 49ers. But shout out to him. He was at the UFC event this last weekend, and Taporia became the champ at 145. He has a video on his channel a couple years back saying that Taporia would be a future champ. So had to give you a little bit of love there. That was a great call by you, man. Great call by you.
And Dreykus. I went
And
2 for
oh
3
yeah,
on that video.
Duplicity too. Yeah,
Yeah.
Duplicity too. Yeah, good call. Good call. Very good call. All right, before we get to the super chat and we get to our
What do you
final.
think, though? What do you think, though, Jesse?
Yeah,
I don't want you, because how do you feel about the 49ers roster build, and where do you think the issues lack?
yeah, man. I mean, for me, like I said, I have a philosophical difference. It's quarterback, it's protect the quarterback, and then it's get after the quarterback. The 49ers seem to have gone in the direction of get after the quarterback, skill positions, then quarterback, then offensive line. It's not like they didn't try with the quarterback. They just didn't hit. And so they did put a lot of effort in trying to get the quarterback. They went and got Jimmy G, traded for him. They went and traded a lot for Trey Lance. So they did put the effort in. They just didn't hit, but that's not because they didn't try. Offensive line, though, the effort to get a really good offensive line here, I don't think has been there the way that it could have been. And that's because they've chosen to go different directions, and they've kind of been a little bit light on some of these players and thought that they could bypass that. So I think the issue's gone on long enough, though, to where they have to see it now. They know they have to draft somebody high. They haven't had a first round pick in a while. They've got to do it this year. If they don't do it this year, I'll be very, very frustrated, Sunil. Very
I agree.
frustrated with
I
whatever
would
they
be
do.
too.
So
If they don't draft somebody in the first or second round that is going to be a starter on that offensive line, it would be, they. I wouldn't defend them. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of guys out there. Fortunately for the 49ers, there's a lot of tackles out there, or even some tackles that can kick in and play guard, if that's the route that they want to take. But they have options. They definitely have options, and they will have options at 31. And so I would be frustrated if they didn't take advantage of those options when they come up. So we'll see what they do. But they've been to 2 Super Bowls. They've been to multiple NFC championship games. I'm not going to rip them too hard. Obviously, I want to get over the hump. I'm not satisfied with finishing second, but what they've done so far has worked pretty good. But now we're starting to see where it's like, all right, you're starting to bust at the seams a little bit. You need to figure out how to tighten this thing up. And now that you've got first round picks again, you have to figure out a way to protect Brock Purdy. I mean, you've made claim and said that you finally have your franchise quarterback. Well, now that you have him, you have to find a way to protect him long term. And Trent Williams being at the age that he's at, I know he says, I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to keep playing. Any year could be his last year. So take advantage of him being on this roster, build around him, and find his eventual replacement and continue to build through the draft. Now is your opportunity. Please take advantage of that opportunity. You can't wait any longer.
Yeah, and because of how well they've drafted, Jesse, they could spend their first and second round draft picks on offensive line and still be great because they do so well in later round drafts, and pretty much they're not replacing any starters outside of the offensive line. Everybody else is already kind of spoken for.
Well, yeah, and McKivitz, all of a sudden, if he's not your starter, is a really good depth piece. Like, I love McKivitz as your first guy off the bench. You know what I mean? Like, that's a great first guy off the bench. And now all of a sudden you're deep at the offensive line position to where it's like, okay, McKivitz is your starter, but if he goes out, you got Jalen Moore, and it's just not ideal. It's not ideal. So, but McKivitz is your first guy off. I'm happy with that.
How are you evaluating Burford?
I don't think they need to panic and replace him necessarily. You definitely need to draft some competition, right? But that shouldn't be your priority. Your priority is to get a right tackle that can eventually kick over to left tackle if you can find that guy. And then certainly you should draft somebody, maybe compensatory pick, 3rd round, somebody in the 4th round, something like that, to compete with Spencer Burford for sure.
I would love to see them get a guard center as well. A right tackle and then a guard center.
I love that. And a lot of guards can play center and vice versa. And I think just having the competition between the 3 guys, up the middle between Burford and your rookie and Brendel, and figuring that out, I'm totally fine with. Totally fine with that. So, all right. Before we get to the super chat, before we get to the final 2 topics, I got a word on my sponsor for today. Here's a 60-second break we're going to take, hear about the sponsor, and then we'll get back to it. Have you ever actually Googled yourself to see what's out there like I'm doing here? You'll know that your personal information, like your phone number, your address, previous phone numbers and addresses, your children's name, all of it, they're all out there. Not stuff that I want most people seeing. That is why I'm using today's sponsor, Aura. Aura automatically takes care of all of it for me. Shows me what data brokers are selling my information and gets rid of it at my behalf. As you can see here on screen, Aura is taking care of 18 current data threats that are out there on the web for anyone to get. They give me antivirus protection. They give me VPN. They give me identity theft insurance, plus much more, and they do it at one affordable monthly price. You too can use Aura. Get your 2-week free trial today. Protect your identity, protect your family's identity. Link is in the description below. Aura.com/last second. All right. Little sponsor read about Aura. Check them out. Link is in the description. Let's hear from Cryptic. Cryptic says, we always hear players love playing in San Francisco because of the culture and having fun. Do you think that's also an issue and need some players to hold guys in check and take things seriously as an alpha. Cryptic, it's so funny that you say this because I remember last offseason, I got into a little bit of a scuttlebutt, let's say, on X in some of the spaces. And I said that the 49ers need a little bit of crazy. They need a little bit of crazy on this team. Not that Fred Warner is not a leader or Brandon Ayuk or some of these guys aren't leaders, but I couldn't remember a situation where you had a player go up to other players, get in their face on the sideline, hold them accountable in an intense moment, a pressure-packed moment, maybe grab them by the face mask, get them riled up, whatever. And I was called crazy for that. And I really feel like in this Super Bowl, we saw some of that happen on the Kansas City. That everybody has to be that type of leader. You want a bunch of guys like that are going crazy on the sidelines, but you want somebody that will hold people accountable, be a little bit fiery. So I don't think it's necessarily a problem or they have to have that guy, but I would love to have at least one of them. That's me personally. So
You don't think Dre
I hear what
Greenlaw's
you're
that
saying.
guy?
I think Dre Greenlaw is that guy on the field as far as a little bit crazy, like he's got a screw loose on the field. I don't know that he's that guy on the sideline. I've never seen him get in somebody's face and like, hit him helmet to helmet or grab him by the face mask or just get fiery on the sideline. Like you just don't see that from the 49ers. So I don't know. I'd like
I
it.
feel like also they're not in a lot of situations where that's warranted, unfortunately, to see that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're like,
For sure.
they're not down a lot, to be honest.
No, they're not. They're not. But like even in the Detroit game, you had your opportunities, or the Super Bowl. If I guess what I'm saying is they've had enough opportunities that if that guy existed, we would have seen it by now. And I don't think that guy exists on this roster. And again, I don't think that's a prerequisite to win a Super Bowl. But I would like to see one of those guys on this roster personally. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Definitely would. Charles Barkley. What's up, Charles? You're not on TNT tonight? He says, why do Grant and David Lombardi hate each other? I don't think they hate each other at all. I mean, from what I know, they work pretty closely in that media room together. They're cordial with each other. I think that there's natural competition that anybody would have in this space. And they're the two guys that are credentialed and have the biggest following. And they have major philosophical differences. One guy loves to carry water for the organization. One guy really doesn't care if he's not liked by the organization. And they're kind of at two ends of the spectrum. One guy is like goes over the deep end, maybe too much for people's liking. And one guy carries the water, maybe too much for people's liking. But they're there. So I don't think that there's any beef or true hate. I think there's natural competition and a philosophical difference in how they view this team, which is fine. Brother Bob says, I haven't seen Twitter. Sunil beefing with someone. No, he's not beefing with anybody.
Never beef, Brother Bob.
Never. All right. Let's talk about the defensive coordinator. And the first question I'm going to ask you is this. I'm going to go a little bit different direction. Then we can get into maybe who you think that it should be and what have you. But over or under 12:01 a.m. Saturday morning, a defensive coordinator will be on this team. Do you think it happens before Saturday morning at 12:01 a.m. or do you think it'll happen after?
Before.
Okay.
I think it happens in the next couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's getting close, but
it's remarkable that there's no rumors right now. That's like for 40, like that just shows that if anything comes out of this team, it's because they put it out. Because to keep this as tight-lipped as it is pretty impressive.
It does almost feel like it's there, right? Like they know who it is, or at least who they want it to be.
Right.
I'm going to agree with you, by the way. I think that we will know before then. Okay. Do you think we know who you want? And I agree with you. I think we both agree on Bullocks, which is interesting. We're there together. But do you think that it's going to be somebody in-house, or do you think it comes from outside the organization? And you don't have to tell me who specifically, but
yeah, I mean, honestly, I would want it to be internal. I think we did the external hire, and I mean, Marco made some really great points, and I know you work closely with him too. Like, it kind of, if you're bringing somebody external, unless Kyle Shanahan is willing to um, allow them to bring their own system in, it doesn't make sense to like bring somebody external and then ask them to do what you want them to do. It's like you might as well just bring somebody that already is running that system or is already in that system. And we've seen how much success they've been able to have with the internal hires, whether it be Sala, whether it be D'Amico. So I like Daniel Bullock, but I would just want him to be internal hire just because I think that um, camaraderie with the team, keeping everything the same and just like going back to what I think ultimately works for the defense. To me, I think that's the smartest move.
Emiliano says the DC will be goated, scapegoated.
That's a good one.
That's actually pretty good. I agree with you, by the way. I think that it should come from the internal team. There's a lot of talk about, could it be Bill Belichick or could it be Carroll? And maybe I'm not going to say it's impossible. I think it's unlikely. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you have to remember, if you bring in somebody like that, they're going to want their whole staff, their whole defensive staff. You're going to have to get rid of the guys like Bullocks and Holland and some of these guys, most likely Kasarik. They're going to want their guys here and they're going to want to call the shots. And I just don't see that you're going to see Kyle want to go that route. I think he's going to go with somebody that can fit in, whether that's somebody outside the organization that he feels fits or somebody within the organization that he can just promote and then replace them. So I think we're going to know soon. And I think if I had to guess, it would be somebody within the organization. And I hope that it's Bullocks. So,
and ultimately, Jesse, I think both of us know that, this is another all in year. Like, you don't want to implement a new system and then have that chance of, what ultimately ended up happening in with the Eagles, right? Their defense was never to where it needed to be to go back to be a Super Bowl contender. And so I think, like you said, but there is, out of Carroll and Belichick, who do you think who has more of a chance? I think both of us wanted to be internal, but let's just speculate wildly right now. Out of those two, who do you think is more likely to be the defensive coordinator?
Out of Belichick and Carroll?
Let's say Belichick, Carroll, and Vrabel, because those are the three. I don't even want to talk about the San Diego Charger guy that they're trying to throw out there.
Oh, Staley.
Yeah.
I'll go Vrabel. Because he's still young enough in his career where I think he would do it. I think Bill Belichick's almost an impossibility. So
I think he's the most likely, to be honest. And I'll tell you why.
Really? Okay.
Because Belichick, I think, still wants to coach in this league. But I think that he is severely hindered. I think that the talk about him is he has allowed the offensive side of the game to bypass him. So if he could spend a year with Kyle Shanahan, who is considered one of these offensive, innovators, I think that would make him more appealing to the next coaching cycle. That, hey, now he could go in there and be like, look, these are the changes I'm going to be making on offense, along with the elite defense that I've always had, right? So I think that's kind of more where I see the possibility of it. But then the negative side is, does Kyle Shanahan have the humility to have a Bill Belichick? If they do win the Super Bowl, all that kind of stuff is going to be, because Bill Belichick was there type of situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, that Bill would get all the credit. Right. He would. It's like, oh, Kyle couldn't get over the hump until he was there. The reason I say Bill Belichick is unlikely, or really, I think we both agree he's unlikely, but I just don't see it. It actually has less to do with would he do it or would Kyle's ego be okay with it. It's more of he's an East Coast, Northeastern type of guy. I just don't think that a West Coast team is his vibe. I really don't. I don't know that he's willing to make that change at this stage in his life. And so I think that he prefers to be over there and would prefer to continue to coach over there. And that's ultimately what he's looking for. And if that means he never coaches again, I think that's a possibility. I just don't think that he's willing to uproot and move all the way to the West Coast to make that happen. But I could be wrong. We'll see. I'd love it. I mean, I think it would be great. I'd love to have Bill Belichick. I think it'd be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I just don't see it, man. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong, though. I really do. A lot of people are saying Staley because I think him and Kyle have the same agent. And obviously, we know that he comes from McVay and knows that system as well. So I don't know. I hope it's not Staley, though. I really do.
No, right.
Sal says Cruz morning homie said that the Cones don't know football. You might want to look into why he might say something like that. Do your research. There's a reason there for that. Fish and Chip says Kyle's scheme strangles the team every year. I don't know what that means. Is he saying like? I mean, I don't know. I guess you're saying maybe it like when it comes to big time moments, they just don't perform because they're scheme oriented versus feel of the game oriented. That does seem to be the case, but man, his scheme is pretty damn good too. Brother Bob says no 70-year-old Super Bowl winning head coach will be Kyle Levy's DC. All right. We'll see. We'll see. You might have to eat those words. Okay. Let's talk about this mystery topic. This one, I've been waiting for this one for a while.
Uh-oh.
You don't know what it is. Obviously, the chat doesn't know what it is. We're going to play a little game here. I'm going to call it extend, keep, and cut. And I got 3 different sets of players that we're going to do this with, okay? And I think they're all within the wheelhouse of each other, which will make this a lot of fun. So you got to choose one player to extend, no matter where they're at in their contract. You extend them. One player to keep, and just keep them on where they're currently at, and one player to cut. All right. So the first group of players is Kyle Juszczyk, Juwan Jennings, Chase Young. Who are you extending? Who are you keeping? And who are you cutting? Or I guess in Chase Young's situation, cutting, just letting him walk, right?
So I would sign Jennings. Well, you would have to sign Chase as well. I don't know how this works because both of them are free agents. You know what I mean?
Well, Jennings is a restricted free agent, right? So you could conceivably bring him back, and it's not. So technically, you could bring him back without having to give him a major deal or anything.
Well, let's just say.
So you could say keep for him and then extend Young if that's what you want to do.
Let's say I would want to extend Jennings because I would want to keep him here long term because ultimately I think Debo is not going to be on this team in a few years. I would probably cut Juice and
bring back Chase. Young on like a 1-year deal.
Yeah. Okay. And the reason for that, ultimately, I mean, Juice is really, really good, but I think financially it just makes sense. He makes too much for how much we use him.
I like it. Okay. I like it. I would go keep Juice, extend Jennings, cut Young. I just don't like the lack of effort, man. I can't. I know that, listen, fullback is not a premium position. Pass rusher is, all those things, but I'm cool on Chase Young. I really am. And we called out his effort issues very early on this channel, and a lot of people didn't want to hear it. And then all of a sudden it was this big thing going into the Super Bowl. And it's like, yeah, that's been there the whole time. Outside of really the Jacksonville game, it's been there every week. You've seen it. So I'm not with it, man. If that should have been the best Chase Young we saw effort wise. It was a team that was trying to win a Super Bowl. He's in a contract year. What more do you need incentive wise to get the job done and show your effort play in and play out? And by the way, you were like rotational in and out. It's not like you were getting tired. So for me, I'm out on Chase Young. So I would get rid of him. All right, here's the next set. Extend, keep, and cut. You've got Debo, you've got Armstead, and you've got Kittle. Who are you extending? Have to extend one. Who are you keeping and who are you cutting?
Oh man. So I would extend Kittle. I would keep Debo, and I would cut Armstead.
Oh, I like it.
And the only
Ooh.
reason for that is I feel like we played most of the season without Armstead.
Yeah.
So
I actually think I'm going to agree with you on this one. This one was tough, but I think I have to agree with that. The logic makes sense. The logic makes sense. Okay.
and for whatever Kittle, like I do think Kittle is on, not actually the peak Kittle, but I still don't think we're finding anybody in the draft that's going to replace his production. You know what I mean? So even if you keep him for a couple of years, like I think it's so hard to find somebody with his impact on blocking, and he's still a weapon on, in the receiving game as well. I still think he has a few more years of still being better than what we could get on the draft, unless we draft high, a tight end high. I don't think you're finding a fourth or fifth rounder that's going to be able to just seamlessly give us what we give with him. So I'm okay with kicking the can on him in this situation. And Debo, I got to keep him because I want to trade him, when his contract becomes easier to trade.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. This is going to be the hardest one of the night. Extend, keep, and cut.
Okay.
You have Brock Purdy,
Ooh.
Brandon Ayuk,
Ooh.
and CMC. Who are you extending? Who are you keeping? And who are you cutting? I think people might be surprised by my answer here, but let's go.
Oh my gosh. This is one of those that I gave you the last time, bro.
Exactly. It's nice to see you squirm for once.
Oh my gosh.
He's like, wow, come on, man.
This is so tough because all right, so I'm keeping
I've had the whole
CMC.
day to think about this one, just so you know.
I'm keeping CMC.
Okay.
Man, I gotta extend Purdy, and I'm not even gonna say the C word with Ayuk. I'm trading Ayuk.
There we go. That's fair. We'll trade him. Oh man. Okay. All right. So I'm keeping Purdy. I'm extending Ayuk.
Ooh.
And I'm cutting CMC. And
wow.
Here's my logic. CMC's 27, coming off of a 400 touch season. The end is very close for him. We're a year or two away from him no longer being CMC. So I'll take my chances on a 26-year-old receiver who's ascending. And Brock Purdy's been very good. But if I extend him, that means I'm committing to him being elite in this league. And you know me, I don't pay quarterbacks unless they're elite. And I don't know that yet. I have my doubts. So I can't say I'm going to give Purdy $45-50 million a year right now. I got to see it for one more year. So I'm going to extend Ayuk. I'm going to keep Purdy, and I'm going to cut CMC.
Oof. Brutal. Hey, if you were John Lynch in this situation, the fan base is at your throat, brother.
Yeah, probably. But listen, man, I got to do it. I gotta do it. Man, that was tough though. That was tough. That
thankfully
last one,
that's not a situation that anybody's in. So.
No, not at all. Not at all. But it was a fun situation to talk about. It was definitely a fun one. Fish and Chip says FB gets on the field at wide receiver. He's going nowhere fast. FB gets on the field at wide receiver.
Fullback, maybe?
Fullback, maybe? That's the only thing I can think of. Right? That's the only.
Yeah,
I don't know. He's probably talking about the the situation that I gave up. So yeah, I see what he's doing. Switch subjects. You uncomfortable with that one, Kudo? You're not a big fan of that one? I understand. I totally understand. That was a tough one, man. It's not easy. All right, listen. 224 of you in here. Appreciate each and every one of you. Much love. Tomorrow, I will have a call-in show, open mic night after my show with Grant. So around 10 p.m. Eastern, be back here. If you want to talk 49ers football, it's your night. Open mic night. You're given 5 minutes to get off your takes. So be ready. Be prepared. Let's talk 49ers. I want to get your opinions. And sorry, KB, it's not here tonight. I can't do it, man. I can't do it every night, right? It's only a shtick that I reserve for special occasions. And tonight is not one of those. So be ready for that. Sunil, thank you for giving me an hour plus of your time. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace.